Hey, everybody, welcome back to Smack. It's Mars here. I'm here with my boys, PD and Kyle. Say what's up, gents.
What's going on?
Ready to rock.
Hey, today we're going to be talking about some of the cancellations that Marvel and DC have announced, and how that affects the general comic purchasing group. In addition, you will also want to touch base on this whole thing about whether Marvel and DC are really going to get it down and have another crossover. So, hey, let me start off with our man himself, the one who knows everything, the Prime Minister, PD. PD, give us a little background on this stuff about some of the cancellations and the possible collab with Marvel.
No, I think it's just three titles from each, from DC and Marvel. Like DC has Shazam, as we can see, Power Girl. Well, both of them we could say yet again, and then
yet again.
That's a six. That's a two-part. But I know it's Shazam, and then on the X-Men side, it's like three X-Men titles, which they are canceling. So we got X-Force, NYX, and X Factor. So it's a time of struggle. So I don't know if these titles were the ones to kind of pick out to do, because they have a lot of other stuff that was going on that was pretty hot with the absolute stuff. But when you have something where you have your sales going to one, it's going to, the other titles are going to suffer too. So you have your Batman titles and your Superman titles. Then these type of titles are not going to last when you got your duplicates of duplicates. So, well, it's a sad thing to see, but at the same time, they should try to stay as lean as they can, because especially DC, because Marvel seems to just do whatever they want now, and DC, they've changed hands many a time. But now CC Sapolsky and the top person of DC they're doing crossovers again. So that'll obviously push numbers up again, which is a fake sort of thing. But fans like it and they run to it. So and you get some fights that people want to see. I mean, that's what the one that they last talked about, which I think Quesada and Bendis was trying to force DC to do, was Batman. Daredevil, and they were like, no, let's wait until the climate changes. And Bendis was like, well, my fans are gonna feel a way. And it's like, no, we're gonna hold off. But now we're doing crossovers again. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I gotta agree with you on some of that stuff. Cal, what's your take on this? The cancellation of an interesting 3 from Marvel and 3 from DC. What is it, a tit for tat? Tell us, what's your thought on this?
I'll call that coincidence, at least for right now. The cancellations on DC, these are, like, for lack of a better term, repeat offenders. These are characters who they're into like volume 6, 7 in terms of, say, Power Girl, of how many series they've had. They'll get a series, it runs whatever it runs, and then it gets canceled. So I can't remember what was the longest running Power Girl series. I don't know if this is, I don't know if this was it, but Power Girl, all the series that I remember, usually they get canceled like around the teens, like 12, 15, 16, maybe about a year and change. So this one did a bit better at 20. Captain Marvel actually topped out, I think the longest, well, with the exception of the original, longest running series for DC topped out at over 50 issues. So this is definitely shy of what Captain Marvel you would want to expect from that series. But since the Power of Shazam series with Jerry Ordway hasn't really had that series had staying power that none of the other ones have had, which, for obvious reasons, they just don't have a finger on the pulse of what is the reason for this character to be around, other than we don't want to lose any more rights than we already have when it comes to Captain Marvel. And the last one was Two-Face. With Two-Face is a villain, with the exception of who? Doctor Doom and the Joker. A long-running villain series is just not in the cards, even if it is a Batman villain. So these are certain things I would think to be expected. The Marvel stuff I'm not really familiar with. I know you're more familiar with that, Mars, than I am. But for the DC stuff, this isn't too surprising. It would be more surprising if You know, if they were telling me 3 or 4 Batman titles were being canceled, that would be shocking.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that would be shocking. That would mean the industry is not doing well. Now, I know in terms of we were talking about the X-Men, PD, of course, is our resident X-Men, all thing X-Men expert. But I mean, after the Fall of X relaunch of X-Men, and I think what they're doing, what they call this X-Men in the Ashes or something, X-Men from the Ashes. The fact that there's all these titles, Uncanny X-Men #1, X-Men #1, Exceptional X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, NYX, or I used to call Knicks, but it's New York X-Men basically, following X-23. It was just so much. I mean, on top of that, you have Psylocke, you have Magic, you have so many different X-Men titles. I mean, I've always thought one of the problems X-Men always had is that the amount of titles they have, it dilutes just dilutes the stuff that they have out there right now. So it's hard for people to keep track of X-Men as a group. It should be its own comic book company spun off or whatever. But
You can't at the period the X-Men was rolling. If you were a part of the books that were coming out, then it doesn't. As long as the difference between this and some of the other things that they're doing is that the X-Men didn't come and say, "Here's 7 titles." Right? You had the X-Men, you had people at Marvel wanting to do a spin-off series, and it took till, or I guess around 81 or 82, they wanted to do X-Men West Coast, and then Chris Claremont did the New Mutants. That was something that they wanted to do possibly within the title, having a junior set of team, but then they said, let's do the New Mutants, and that was successful. And then at the same time, they're like, hey, X-Men don't go out and save mutants anymore. So let's do X Factor. So that was but from another creator. So that we got greenlit. And then when those 3 titles were rolling, they just had Alan Davis, who they thought were going to be a smash. So they're like, well, that was the one, being excessive. Let's do Excalibur to have something for Alan Davis to do, and that was X-Men and what's the name? And Chris Claremont was fighting to keep Wolverine in miniseries. It's like, let's just keep doing miniseries with them and keep them special. And then they were like, no, we really want to do it. So all right, I'll come with a framework for it for the first 10 issues, but I can't do monthly Wolverine. So then we had Wolverine, which was, I think well over 100 issues, the original series. And it was extremely successful. So as those titles were going, that's around what, 80, that's around 88. So then you had miniseries. They always had miniseries. So it's like during the time when things are rolling, I guess it's similar to like I guess the Superman titles back in the Silver Age. When the titles are successful, then you have a lot of characters, you can expand. That's what expansion is about. And of course, when the money goes out, and well, actually for the X-Men, the money didn't really go out. They maybe cut maybe a couple titles, but by 95, I guess 96, when the Image guys came in, they wanted the X-Men titles, and Marvel was like, no, like, why would we give you those titles? It's not until the Toy Fair, that was it, the Heroes World thing, where they went bankrupt. And even then, the X-Men titles and the Spider-Man titles were still extremely successful. It took them up to Bendis bringing Wolverine over into the Avengers, which it finally really broke the X-Men. But the X-Men still always had at least 4 titles, and most were successful. They'd have some extraneous titles, which kind of, I think X-Force was on and off and on, but there was always like at least 2 core X-Men titles and that sort of thing. So while you're a success, you expand. And of course, at some point, and that's the key to success. Success meaning you do as much as you can until the audience stops buying. That's the way kind of business works. You see it with in TV, when Westerns were rolling, you just do more and more and more. Action movies, cop movies.
But Petey, I think one of the big differences with the X-Men is that whereas like in Batman, which is successful, probably one of the all-time successful brands.
No, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing the phony Batman thing.
I'm not arguing with you, bro. So again, what I was going to repeat myself again, because just in case.
Batman had 2 titles. Batman had 2 titles and some miniseries, right? He had 2 titles, and then at some point, from the rocky ground, they found through doing the branding of having the titles at the top and death with, you know, what was it? Death in the Family, and branding the sort of stories. They were able to do a third title and the fourth title, and then it went kind of back to 3 titles or 2 titles and special titles. But that's understanding what the market is. Saying they got it to what, 4 in special titles, and then it pulled back to 2 and special titles. And it might, you know, when people come along and say, like, I guess Mark Silvestri says, hey, I want to do Batman and Joker, and they're like, this guy is what's the name? They'll do another one. But as long as the success is there, they're going to do multiple titles of that stuff. But don't try to throw in the Batman stuff in comparison, because Batman had a rocky road. Is not really until the '89 where they had Batmania, where everything Batman was selling, and that's when they kind of figured out it being a thing. But when the crash happened on Batman 2.
Okay, now again, I was going to say, now we know one of the most successful comic book characters around, Batman. The very fact that we're going to have that Batman has been successfully expanded as Batman himself in numerous titles. People know who Batman is, you know. But when you have all these titles of all these mutants, of all these different comic book characters, it's just, I think, brand confusion. Are there some that are highlighted, like Cyclops, you know, Mr. Sinister and Apocalypse, that people want to see more of? Yes, clearly, that's what people want to see more of, you know. And Phoenix, that's what people want to go out and check out. And those are characters people remember. But there's just way too many mutants.
Well, I know.
That's why it hurts. I think it hurt the sales. They need to reduce the amount of titles and focus on the big kahunas that people really want to see.
The rule is the same thing with Spider-Man titles. After the clone was, they had like 4, and then they reduced them to 2, and they kept, maybe we have a special one. And Marvel realized we never do that. If the stuff sells and we stop selling on one of them, we cancel, but we don't make the decision to unify the brand by taking away a title. And the X-Men, you are in some way correct. Only difference is they shouldn't have put out 6. They should have put out the 2 in a relaunch, having a 3rd on the side. If you're doing well enough, you put out another, Everyone looks at the Image sort of thing, but Image worked putting out one title at a time, same way Marvel did it. Every time you try to do a universe explosion, it never really works. Like, you know, New Universe, I guess even Valiant was a slow build, but every relaunch of Valiant was, here's all these titles at once. You know, and that kind of, only time that I think that kind of worked was when DC did their New Heroes right before John Romita Jr. That's the closest time where they had a buzz around a whole bunch of titles at once. But usually you test the waters with one title, and then you try another one if it's successful.
Well, I'm glad you agreed with me, Petey. I mean, because, by the way, there's going to be another Batman relaunch, Batman #1 with Matt Fraction and Jorge Jimenez. You hear that, Cal? It should be another hit, just like Absolute Batman. So that is understandable, simple, one character. I didn't want to make that. Okay. But hey, getting back to
not taking the bait.
These